scariest location you've ever visited? Story 1. Since the statute of limitations is up, I need an old building on a former army base. The basement was full of blue barrels and plenty of twists and turns to creep you out. The building had a bunch of classrooms that looked like everyone just dropped what they were doing and left. Desks with supplies still. Assignments and lessons still on the chalkboards. Very weird. One of the rooms was full of gas masks that had been cut up probably for disposal. We kept hearing footsteps above us, but as we went up to the third floor and attic, there was nothing. Scariest, creepiest place I've explored. I kinda wanna go back. Story 2. It's now torn down BTW. But 2 years ago, me and my group of friends visited an abandoned mental hospital rumored to be haunted. But I quickly found out all of the hauntings were merely people trying to with you mentally. I found this out when on the third and final time we went there before it got torn down, we saw who we thought were ghosts following us. I said there's no way, and we decided to go check it out. And we found a group of 4 guys and 1 girl no older than 25 laughing their asses off. When we confronted them, they said that they have been going there once every week since 2016 to mess with people who went there. Fun times. Story 3. Went through the wrong side of Cleveland by accident. Got approached twice by groups of sketchy dudes while at a red light. Blew right through both of them. Story 4. Blue Mist Road, near my hometown. It's out in the backwoods of Pennsylvania, north of Pittsburgh. It's not really a road. Driving on it is like off-roading. Gravel lined with massive potholes, craters that is not maintained. There is an enormous tree that stands out on the road and has been said that tree was used by the KKK to hang many people outside of their ideology. The lore is the place is haunted by their spirits. My senior year in HS, my buddy and I decided to go check it out. We took my piece of Datsun 310 down the road. We had to drive so slow or my car was going to fall apart. We started out laughing, but it got quiet in the car pretty fast as we approached the tree. I would have loved to just floor it and GTFO out of there, but the road made that impossible. It's dark, we are in the middle of nowhere, and it's 1987. No cell phones. It was honestly terrifying. I can still hear my buddy asking, pleading to go faster. His voice several octaves higher than as usual. This is not a short road either. In total, it was like a 10-minute drive that felt like an hour. Holy, I just Googled it for the first time ever. I thought it was kind of a local area thing. Looking at these pictures now is giving me the chills. Story 5. A small town in the Texas Panhandle. We were looking a hotel, and the only one we found was closed off due to construction. So we drove around looking for another one. We found an old school motel that might as well have said rape and murder motel. This place was horrible looking, gave new meaning to the phrase hole in the wall. Story 6. I don't quite remember what this place was called, but my dad used to be a pastor at some church. Because of that, I had to stay with him on weeknights because he needed to prepare for the sermon on Sunday and talk with the team, leaving me, a 7-year-old, bored with nothing to do for 1 to 2 hours. Well, anyway, I got his permission to explore the church one night and started to go off on my own. I went through a few rooms that didn't mean much to me, a kitchen, supply closet, etc. But then I opened a new door, one I'd never seen before. I opened the door and found this old nursery room. Thinking about it now reminds me of some of those liminal spaces that you'll see in certain places on the internet. The lights in that room were barely working, and the room was full of old wooden toys, some faded, scratched up wallpaper, and a carpet that was partially detached from the floor. I was in there for probably no more than 10 seconds. After that, I got too scared and noped out. Story 7. Probably the crack house my uncle took me to when I was 15. They were using a Ouija board trying to contact the dealer that got stabbed to ask him who did it, LMFA Uyo. When we left, my uncle called her a filthy gypsy because she wouldn't front him. I felt fucked from all the crack smoke like I was in a lucid dream or something. Story 8. A Middle Eastern country as a mother with a 13-month-old child with a 24-HR stopover. The airline misplaced, lost our luggage. The hotel was in the middle of nowhere. Literally no town or shops or village. 2 hours from the airport. I had no nappies, no food, and no one would talk to me. This was 30 years ago. It is still the worst thing ever. Story 9. My teenage boy's bedroom. Christ, there are things on there I don't go near without a full level 4 hazmat suit. And the smell. Moldy football kit, old socks, all competing with enough Lynx Africa to subdue a bull elephant. Story 10. An emergency breakdown at a butcher warehouse alone in the middle of the night. Carcasses hanging everywhere on meat hooks, silent, dark, and felt like I should be looking over my shoulder while doing repairs. Story 11. A Best Western motel in Elkhart, Indiana, in the 70s. You could see where the door had been kicked in more than a couple times. The sliding glass door to the back did not lock, and the wall-mounted TV had been ripped out a few times too. I didn't sleep a wink that night. Story 12. Professor in college. Known for preying on female students. Just us two in his office alone after hours to discuss a paper. I couldn't wait to get out of there. Story 13. Long walkway in the basement of the Biltmore Hotel in Asheville. You're in a long, narrow hallway enclosed by solid concrete walls on both sides that feel like they are closing in on you and make you feel claustrophobic. claustrophobic. Story 14. An old hotel from the 1800s in dollars. I went to bed, turned everything off, then woke at midnight to the TV showing a young girl around 5, scooping the eyes out of a dead kitten with a spoon. A male voice then told me I was to go for a walk, then said, "Strip." I left the hotel and walked up a side street shivering, then remember thinking I would be locked out. But I followed a neon sign and the door happened to open for me. The girl was still on the TV and I quickly turned it off and jumped into bed. I didn't sleep much. Story 15. Auschwitz. You can hear about the Holocaust and study it and all that, but it doesn't compare to being there. The scale of that place alone is enough to send shivers down your spine. And there's this immense feeling of dread that hangs over everything. Story 16. The church I went to growing up. It was well over 100 years old and was Gothic revival architecture. Nothing but stone, tile, and brick, with lots or ornate wooden carvings and gold relief. It was beautiful. However, there were all these twists and turns, tunnels and odd, almost secret passages you could explore as a kid. Whenever we were in certain areas, there was always feelings of being watched, a presence in the room, lurking. Maybe God is real? Anyways, this place had a couple classrooms where I saw my first shadow people, scared the out of me. Always down this hallway, a dark shadow would be standing in an empty classroom. I got ballsy one time with my brother, and we checked it out and no one was in the room. I would see that shadow figure in various rooms. It got to the point I wouldn't go to certain areas of the church alone. I stopped attending church when I was 18. Story 17. I got off at the wrong subway stop in the mid-90s in Brooklyn. I walked into a Burger King, and it was like the record scratched, and everybody stopped. An old man came up to me and told me, "You're in the wrong spot and I shouldn't be here." I walked out, and 2 cops asked me what I was doing and directed me back to the subway and told me not to get off the platform until the next train came. Yes, I was a white male teenager. Story 18. The Colorado Museum of Prisons. Or better yet, the very first gas chamber that my state used. They actually have it there at the museum. And although it's stated everywhere that you're not supposed to go inside, I actually did it. It was very creepy. Story 19. Back in the 70s when I performed recovery for a funeral home, it was doing the pickup of a deceased man one evening in the morgue at Greystone Park Psychiatric Hospital in NJ. Ice-cold, misty, dark room that smelled like, with bodies on gurneys, covered in sheets with tags on their toes, overseen by a morbidly obese man who kept giggling. Story 20. The old TB asylum in Kalamazoo, MI, before it was torn down in 2009 to 10. It sat on this huge hill overlooking this big cemetery, and the only way in was either climbing a rope or going in through a manhole on the property. We kept hearing stuff walking around above us, but when we would go check it out, we would never find anyone. We even would split up to try and catch people fucking with us, but never saw another person outside of our group. Story. The basement of my childhood home scared the out of me. My friend and I would sit at the top of the stairs looking down into the blackness, and our minds would be racing as to what we thought we were seeing. We'd dare each other to see how many steps we could go down and would inevitably come screaming back up the stairs. It didn't help that at the right angle, the light at the top of the stairs would project the door handle down into the basement in the shape of a human head. Good times. Top actual spooky place though was an old asylum that was being demolished. A girl I had a crush on wanted to check it out, so in we went. Story 22. Not too creepy, just ominous. But Avenue of Giants is one of the most beautiful yet creepy places I've been. The trees are so beautiful, but there's nothing for miles. If you break down, you're kinda out of luck. Not to mention the wild animal in the woods. This is California redwood forests. There are bears, cougars, mountain lions, and it's so quiet, almost too quiet. Story 23. Z Ward in Adelaide, Australia, a former hospital for the criminally insane that was closed in the early 1970s and which has a reputation for being haunted. Went on a tour organized by a local paranormal investigation team, and the moment we got inside, I was instantly gripped by the feeling that I really didn't want to go upstairs. A feeling I have never had before and hope never to have again. Story 24. Skid Row. It was crazy how dramatic the change was from one street to the next. Felt like a movie set. Haven't been there in 10 years. Imagine it's worse since the parts of downtown I have passed by have homeless people sleeping on the sidewalk. Things were more contained then. Story 25. I used to work overnight at a very large hotel in Dallas, Texas. I would roam around by myself a bit when I got bored and ended up in the basement hallways. These halls were the length of a football field and completely dark. I don't really spook easily, but thinking about the stories of a handful of deaths on the property will get your imagination going. Story 26. In 1990, I, an American, was visiting my sister in Barcelona. She worked evenings teaching night school English, so I was hanging at her apartment with her roommate. Lucy asked me if I wanted to see Barrio Gótico, the oldest section of the city. So we took a walk through streets that were absolutely medieval, dimly lit cobblestone alleys, stone walls with iron bars on the windows, doped-out seamen lurking in doorways, that kind of thing. This was before they fixed up most of the city for the Olympics. It was rough. Lucy, a Basque woman about 4'10", just strolled along like, "No problem. I was terrified. Story 27. 15 years later, I had to go back to my country, my village. Our house was haunted. We all knew it. And when I was a child, every night I would pray God so I don't have to see that man. Ghost. Anyway, we finally left, and years later we were back there, and my dad made us all sleep in that house again. Damn. That was a long, sleepless night with dark and huge spiders crawling around. I am arachnophobic. Thank God. Didn't see that man. Story 28. Kensington. Philadelphia is hands down the scariest place I've been to. It's an open-air drug market, and you have actual zombies walking around like it's an apocalypse. Trash and needles everywhere. Open, oozing sores on people that you can smell in the summer. There are toothless, drugged-out hookers that approach you. Panhandlers missing toes and fingers everywhere. It's crazy. Story 29. The Great Sand Dunes. National Memorial in Colorado. When in February late at night, around 2 a.m., the parking lot was empty. Me and my friend got out and walked up the dunes. It was a cold, moonlit night, eerily quiet. We saw some weird lights further back on the far dunes, glowing bright then dimming, moving around faster than a person with a flashlight, which we thought at first they were, until one shot up into the sky and just vanished, smaller than any star. Got back to the car after a couple of hours, slept in the car until daylight and the gift store ranger station opened. Felt like we were being watched until the sun came up. Story 30. I escaped my Saturday's English lesson, and I took the train. I went to this odd-looking mall. I was big and well-lighted, but something about it just felt off, like entering myself to one of those liminal space images. I don't know if it was the fact that I was one of the few persons in there, almost all stores were closed, or that it was pretty far from my school and house. I ended up taking the train again and going to another mall, closer to my school. Story 31. Paris. Easy. Rome. Easy. Bali. Easy. Phuket. Easy. Singapore. A little concerning with the caning imprisonment laws, but so good a time. Been back 3 times. Malaysia? Oh no, ain't never going back. Hot, muggy, uber-conservative dress codes for women? Nope, nope, nope. I was on edge the entire time. Even being lost in the jungles of Jamaica at night was way less scary. Story 32. The Suicide Forest. Even looking past the moss that consumes everything, the unnaturally twisting trees and creepers, and the unusual amount of spiders, it has this arcane essence that subtly creeps into your mind like an entity from a horror film. My emotions just flung from somber calm, melancholy, and irritation without any change in stimulus. Had constant urges to go off the path which I entertained until I found my self-locking eyes with a big gray snake that was in my path. I'm not religious, but be it a god or demon, there is something in those woods that want to keep you there. Story 33. Short Creek, AZUT. You know, where all those polygamist Mormons are. Car broke down on a road trip. Had to wait for a new alternator. There were 2 unmarried women in our group, and they only left my sight when they went to the toilet. When the tow truck showed up, apparently there had been a spate of abductions. There was always a bunch of abductions, just nobody did anything about it. Story 34. In Tasmania, there is this old mental hospital that looks more like a concentration camp. 4 or 5 buildings left, and they sit in the middle of a massive concrete slab. The place is creepy, just as it gets dark. Story 35. There were rumors of ruins from an old witch's house along the shores of Berlin Reservoir just south of Deerfield, Ohio. Supposedly, she summoned this being named Momo, and it still haunts the woods. To get there, you had to go down this dead-end road called Fewtown, and it ended in a parking lot. From there was a trail through a field, and then woods all the way out into a small peninsula. From the moment we passed the gate of the trail, we all just felt weird. We walked the entire trail at about 10 o'clock at night, pitch black. We found what looked to be an ancient foundation surrounding an indentation in the ground, and said screw this and started walking back. I didn't see anything, but I felt a lot, like we weren't alone. Others in the group stated they kept seeing a large being crossing the path behind us in the dark, following us all the way back to gate. Later in life, we found out there was a couple of murders back in those woods in the 90s, and they never found out what happened. There are still signs to this day saying, if you have info on the murder of, call this number. Story 36. Went on a gambling marathon playing 21 at a local casino. On the 3rd day, I had to Riesly go, so off to the bathroom I go. Man, the relief I felt was awesome. Until I hear women talking, so tired, didn't realize I had gone to the woman's bathroom. Didn't hesitate in speaking up, telling them I was there and why. When I got done, which was quick, the ladies just looked at me and no security people were called on me. Got my money from the table, cashed out and left. No more marathons like that since then. Story 37. Visited an abandoned summer camp in a forest near where I lived at a time. I took a different route home, and by the time night fell, I was in the middle of a swamp with Zbigniew Preissner's Decalogue on blast. It was getting so dark that the details around me started getting blurred. Up until then, I didn't know that a 2-hour hike could turn into a 20-minute run. Story 38. I did paranormal investigation for a few years during my youth. The scariest part of it wasn't the ghosts and spirits. It was accidentally finding a meth operation out of an old abandoned hospital that we got permission to look at. The meth was just sitting there cooking, like the dude ran off. But we didn't know if they were stalking the halls looking to take us out Michael Myers style, so we left ASAP and called the police. Story 39 Gary, Indiana. My family was passing through while camping and we were only there to stop at a grocery store. Now nothing sketchy happened while we were there, but the cashier told us to stay safe. Story 40. Rill in Wales. I'm still not convinced half the people I saw were even human. I literally got served in McDonald's by a thing with 7 fingers on one hand and 2 completely different ears. Story 41. Pelican Bay State Prison, a supermax prison in Crescent City. I was sent to update software for remote terminals, which controlled all aspects of a POD, such as HVAC, opening and closing doors, lights, etc. I had to wear a protective vest just to enter the cage. Took me 3 days. Story 42. The scariest place I've ever visited was a cave in the Tennessee-Alabama GA area, where, halfway through a tight squeeze, our guide just casually said, "Yep, rock above's got a big crack in it. Who knows when it'll go?" I noped so fast out of that cave, pitched my tent, and shivered in 16F winter weather for 3 hours while my group continued to cave. A new fear unlocked that day. That was 15 years ago, and I still outright panic at enclosed spaces like that. Wish I remembered where this place was. All I recall is that it was on private land somewhere in Alabama. Scariest place not in a cave was the backwoods of Ozark National Forest. There's nothing there. The locals made it clear we, out-of-state hikers, weren't welcome. One farmer even told us to go back home. It was straight out Old Gods of Appalachia. Story 43. We were driving through Mississippi at like 3 a.m. and made a wrong turn. I pulled into a driveway to turn around, and a few minutes later, a cop car comes screaming up behind me. The cop jumps out and looked furious, demanding to know what I was doing. I explained what happened, and he looked like he was about to take me to jail when he just got in his car and drove off. We got the out of there quick. Story 44. Waverly Hills. It was both scary and horrifically sad. Did an overnight there and saw a shadow figure. Scared the out of me, but I'd go back in a heartbeat. Did a podcast episode all about our experience. Story 45. This road that I used to drive between my ex-girlfriend's house and my house. It felt like the trees were watching you. I drove with my windows up every time. Story 46. The abandoned part of an Air Force base, complete with creepy abandoned hospital. There is an old mannequin that looks in your direction when you approach, but mysteriously turns around when you reach her. That night, I mostly heard nocturnal animals and things moving amplified by the silence. There wasn't anything to fear but the fear itself. Story 47. Apparently, Gardena CA is supposed to be... That was in 2012, although it wasn't as bad as others have said it is, and being a white Aussie people were nice to me. Story 48. Lemp Mansion for ghosts and stuff wasn't that scary. Some questionable parts of the city had a few different people pull a gun on me. That was scary. Story 49. Not an intentional visit, but was riding the bus in Las Vegas, NV, and had to transfer. Wound up in a rundown area at night with a gang down the block hanging by a convenience store. Survived the 15-minute wait by standing behind the bus stop to minimize visibility. Was almost 100% certain I was not making it back to the hotel that night. Story 50. A museum in a graveyard. It was just me, my mom, and my brother there. I remember seeing a janitor in a huge hallway, at least 45 to each wall. The janitor was by the left wall. I turned around for a sec, I turned back to the hallway, and the janitor was on the opposite side of the hallway. Still don't know how they did it. Story 51. One time I went trick-or-treating, and there was a dark house with a creepy glow, and I saw things that were too scary for me when I was really young. Nowadays, I'm capable of handling some scary things. Story 52. I had to go to the morgue to identify the body of my brother. He had been in a car accident, not his fault, and he was badly disfigured. I did it because I knew it would be awful for my parents to see their son like that. What I saw made me burst into tears. Without warning, for years. Story 53. A sketchy neighborhood in Mexico City. As we neared our destination bar, the sidewalks became broken up and the sun was setting, so we turned around and walked back to our hotel. Story 54. I've broken onto a former base in SC San Francisco, and it was sort of like what you're describing. Very eerie feeling, and it looked like they had left in a hurry. Story 55. Are you talking about that group of kids that tragically died in the abandoned mental hospital back in 2016? It was pretty famous. Lots of dusty and yellowed newspapers in the local library talk about it. Story 56. That happened to me at a local cemetery years ago. It's a huge urban legend in the area that it's haunted. We went late one night, maybe it was Halloween, and just as we were about to leave, heard these heavy chains jingle, very obviously, in the trees at the edge of the plot. The whole group of us froze. Then we heard it again, a heavy chain being dragged along stone, or something rough. Then we hear the most inhuman growl I have ever in my life heard, emanate from the woods on the edge of the cemetery. The whole group screamed, broke, and ran for the car. I stopped halfway back and was like, but wait, what actually could that be? I rallied a couple of friends and we went back into the cemetery towards where the sound came from. As we got about 10 feet from the edge of the woods, 3 kids come charging out of them, laughing their asses off. They said they've been coming there for years fucking with people on Halloween. In all the years they had been doing it, we were the first group to come back to investigate. They had several sections of logging chain and, rather ingeniously, a section of that corrugated dryer vent tube. They would roar into that and wiggle it around, and it would modulate their voices in a really fantastic way. It was truly terrifying in the dark of night. We chatted for a bit and had a good laugh about it all. We then promised to keep their secret and went on with our evening. Absolutely amazing night. Story 57. Your comment makes me think of something. When we go to any place where people go to worship or meditate, there are peaceful vibes. And there is this holiness in the air, so to speak. So why won't the places where horrible things have happened have this nasty vibe and this evil in the air? Story 58. OMG, you just unlocked a memory. My sister took me down that road as soon as she got her license. Longest ride of my life. 10-year-old me thought it was the end for both of us. Story 59. This a factor that lost to time in a way. As before, the internet seeing cars appearing in spots that should not be possible hits a lot harder than posting it online. To have folk tripping over each other just spamming how it haunted by a special effect artist better than most who do Hollywood films. Story 60. Texan here. You were lucky. Little towns in Texas with strange going-ons are for real. Next time, keep driving. I don't even like to drive through them day or night, and I'm from here. Story 61. I regularly lame the drive-through rate in NM to OKC and know exactly what you're talking about. That line of towns that starts with Tex line through Dalhart and Dumas and Pampas. It's so bleak, some of the towns. Like their heyday was 70 years ago, and it shows. In one town, the nicest building was owned by the Bedbug Boys. That makes me shudder. Story 62. Lol. We stopped at a little diner in one of these towns for lunch, and the food was amazing. Open carry welcome. I'm also familiar with SE Colorado and E New Mexico. People are definitely kind of weird out there. I've seen the blackest nights on the highways in that area, and the first thing I thought of was, perfect place to hide a body. Spooky for real. Story 63. I used to attend a large community church that was built around the 1900s. As a small child, that place seemed like half maze, half magical wardrobe. Never really had any spooky experiences, but always loved coming upon a new room or closet that I hadn't seen before. Story 64. Reading this gave me those creepy tingles. Loved your description. It's even creepier due to how vividly you remember the details. Thanks for sharing. Story 65. I grew up in church and still go. I have cleaned many churches with my mom and as an adult by myself. Something about an empty church is so creepy. I always turn on the radio when I clean there and turn it up loud to make me feel better. Story 66. How interesting. I've been during Holy Week and saw the same thing but wasn't creeped out. The horde of people carrying each massive float down the road at night was a little unnerving though. Story 67. I once cleaned my boy's bedroom with a snow shovel and trash bags. No joke. Everything loose was thrown away, recycled, or donated. I'm only willing to tell them to clean twice. They know that if I get to the third time, everything they haven't put away gets donated. Story 68. Reminds me of when my family and I moved from California to Idaho. Whenever somebody caught our CA plates, we'd get the stink eye, and people would tell us to move back. You better believe we got our Idaho plates ASAP. The funny part was we had lived in a rural part of CA that was very much like where we moved to. Story 69. I got pulled over near downtown by myself one tonight because, ma'am, you do not belong here. Born and raised in NoCo, I was oblivious to how bad the area I was in really was until I got home and told my dad. Story 70. The smell, certain places there is what got to me. No way it is what your brain is telling you it is after all those years, but I still remember that smell. Shudder. Story 71. I got a subway to Queens accidentally in the mid-2010s, and an old lady stopped me as I walked off the subway car, told me I was in the wrong place, and made sure I got on the right one. Everyone was staring at me, and I'm pretty sure I was the only white person around. As an Aussie, it was incredibly surreal. Story 72. I recently visited the Missouri State Penitentiary, oldest prison west of the Mississippi. They also have a gas chamber. This one you can go in. There's signs everywhere telling you not to play with the cell doors. Very surreal to be there. Edit. A word. Story 73. Never have heard someone else mention Kalamazoo in random Reddit comments. I had to do a quick Google to check if you were talking about Asylum Lake. I've hiked there with friends before, and one time they were surprised when I mentioned it had actually been an asylum. Strange vibes there occasionally, especially while passing old metal posts and other remnants. I do believe there are many, unmarked, graves there, but I'm not 100% sure. History of Asylum Lake. If you're interested, I was so curious about the place you're referring to. and kinda surprised I didn't just know based on your description. So enjoy this creepy photo of Kalamazoo's old TB sanitarium. Story 74. I visited a friend who was living in Gulu. It was around the invisible children thing, so I knew it had a reputation, but everything was chill when I was there. Everyone was friendly and the food was amazing. But I'll check my privilege. I'm a white guy. If I was a local parent or child, it would have been different since Comey was snatching kids for his bullshit. Story 75. Oh, the memories of the basement in my childhood home. Big ol' nope. I'm a grown woman now and don't like the basement where I work. Honestly, everyone who works there is convinced the place is haunted. Story 76. Believe it or not, there are really nice parts of Gary. I lived there for years and still go there quite a bit for work. The bad parts are really more sad than anything else. Poverty, neglect, lots of abandoned buildings, and decay. But at one time, it really was a beautiful city and some of the architecture really is amazing. It's a shame to see it all rotting away. Story 77. I've never personally felt unsafe in Gardena. I'm also an Asian male, so I just blend in with the rest of the Asians in the southern half of the city LOL.